Should you sell high on DeAndre Swift? Mike Evans goes completely bananas, and Puka Nacua literally got 20 targets this week. Let's talk about all of it. First of all, A.J. Brown on Thursday night. Don't panic about A.J. Brown yet. I know it's early. I know it doesn't look great. I know you saw him on the sidelines and he was complaining to Jalen Hurts, but even though he only had 4 receptions for 29 yards on Thursday night, don't forget A.J. Brown is still one of the best receivers in the entire league. Right now, yes, Devonta Smith is doing very well. However, we are not giving up on A.J. Brown. Do not sell A.J. Brown. He is still going to provide a lot of value to your fantasy team this season.
Yeah, and he still out-targeted Devonta Smith.
Yes.
So it's not like there's a volume concern here very much yet. Jordan Addison, at this point, he's a must start every single week. He's gotten 2 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, and touchdowns are volatile, but he's getting enough volume on a weekly basis, in addition to Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson, that there's no way I'm leaving him on my bench. Until he has a down week or 2. But until then, I'll just count on him scoring the points that he has been, which have been really, really nice. Wide receiver 2 levels. So
yeah, he's
very
been
excited.
An elite rookie. DeAndre Swift, 27 fantasy points in PPR leagues last week. He had 28 carries for 175 yards. I mean, the Eagles line looked good. He also had a touchdown. He had 3 receptions for 6 yards. With DeAndre Swift, what should you be doing with him? Should you be selling high? Let's see what he does next week. If you can get really good prices for him, we're okay with DeAndre Swift as a sell. But we think if he puts together one more really good week, he'll be in a position next week where you can get a crazy return on him. And we just don't trust him long term based on what we've seen from the first 3 years of him being in the NFL.
Yeah, and then our next guy is going to be Alexander Mattison. And talk about a guy that we didn't trust early in the offseason and going into this year, and it's starting to look like it's paying off, us avoiding him in fantasy right now. I mean, he looks straight terrible. He fumbled the ball twice in the game. He lost 1 fumble of those 2 fumbles in the Thursday night game against the Eagles. He did have 6 targets, which was nice. Some checkdowns from Kirk Cousins, but that's not some consistency that we're going to see, especially when Cousins isn't going to be under pressure as much as he was against the Eagles defensive line. And then Mattison, 8 carries for 28 yards. 3.5 yards per carry. This is what we were worried about. When he gets more opportunity and Dalvin Cook isn't there anymore, what's his average going to look like? What's his efficiency going to look like? Is he going to be as effective as he was playing behind Dalvin and making up for lost time? And honestly, so far, it's not looking like that. He's not startable.
Anthony Richardson is no joke. The dude scored 17-something points today.
In the first quarter.
And did it in a period of a minute and a half of game time. Legitimately had 2 back-to-back touchdown runs. But he has got to stay healthy. I mean, if you're going to be looking at Anthony Richardson for a viable quarterback start for the rest of the year in fantasy, he's got to be able to stay healthy. I personally think he will. I think these things that have happened are a little bit fluky. He didn't really even get hurt the first week. He just banged his knee against the turf. So I don't really count that. Hurt is different than injured. He wasn't really injured. Concussion is different, though. So he looked really, really good for fantasy managers, though.
All eyes are on Baker Mayfield, having a second straight really, really solid week. I mean, a top quarterback finish playing the Chicago Bears defense. And I think that's where we're saying, okay, let's temper our expectations with Baker Mayfield. Yes, everyone knows at this point that the quarterback's coach for the Seattle Seahawks last year that built up Geno is the OC for the Bucs. And now I think we're all assuming this year that Baker is going to be that next Geno. Let's wait a little bit. Baker has had some really nice stretches in the past, and then he falls off. If I were to predict anything, I'd say Baker will probably eventually fall off once he plays better teams and better defenses. But I mean, if you started him this week, all power to you. Good for you. You did well. He did have a very good week, and he did look solid.
And Mike Evans also had a good week off of Baker Mayfield's performance. He had 6 receptions for 171 yards and a touchdown. But Mike Evans, not washed. We all thought this is the year Mike Evans is washed. He's not washed, but we have more on him later.
Stroud threw for almost 400 yards. He threw the ball 47 times in this game. I think at this point, it's looking like we were wrong on Dameon Pierce. We weren't especially high on Dameon Pierce, but we liked him at price in fantasy because we assumed, hey, the receiving core in Houston isn't going to be very good. Stroud isn't going to throw the ball a ton. They're probably going to lean on their running backs a lot. Actually, on the contrary, quite the opposite. Stroud is throwing the ball dang near 50 times, granted against the Colts secondary, but I mean, on top of that, the guys who seem to be the ones that are getting the majority of the targets now are Tank Dell, who's a rookie, and Nico Collins. we were anticipating John Mechie and Dalton Schultz, it's looking laughable at this point.
Yes.
I mean, Tank Dell and Nico Collins respectively getting like 9 and 10 targets apiece, and they both look like legitimate weapons. These aren't fluky targets. These aren't like, some of them were garbage time opportunities, but they look like legitimate wide receivers, legitimately good route runners, and after the catch guys who are getting opportunities in the red zone. That screams fantasy.
Yes, it does. Jayden Reed had an awesome day for the Packers. He had 20 fantasy points because he had 2 touchdowns. We understand Christian Watson was out, Aaron Jones was out. We obviously want to see this continue when those guys come back. However, we were very high on Jayden Reed, and be on the lookout for him as a potential waiver pickup. Go ahead.
Yep. And we can take a huge sigh of relief for Drake London, staying on that same matchup. He had 16 points this week. He had a touchdown, I think like 6 or 7 targets, out-targeted Kyle Pitts, out-targeted everyone else in that wide receiver room. So big sigh of relief. Everybody just take a deep breath and exhale. It's going to be okay for the next week, for now. And let's not assume that it's going to be like this every single week. We still have major concerns with the Falcons going forward, but at least Drake London is not dead. Like, we have a pulse. We have a pulse, and that's all we wanted right now.
What we don't have a pulse on yet is why the Lions won't give Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more run. Now, granted, he did have 9 targets in this game, so we are excited about that. However, they literally brought Craig Reynolds into the game so they didn't have to give Jahmyr Gibbs the ball on the ground. I don't understand what it is with the Lions and not using their best playmakers. That said, Jahmyr Gibbs, 12 points in fantasy this week. Not bad. We're obviously expecting more from him in the future.
Yeah, and T. Higgins, a guy that we weren't expecting a ton from this week or really for the season, but he had 2 touchdowns, out-targeted and out-produced Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase this week. Another rough week, honestly, offensively for the Bengals. They still looked off, and you've got to expect this. Slow starts for Cincinnati, slow starts for Joe Burrow. It's going to happen, and we'll touch on Joe Burrow's calf later in this video, but this is something that we didn't see from Higgins, haven't seen for the last couple seasons. He cannot get the ball in the end zone. Like, he'll get it into the red zone, but then he doesn't get anything in the end zone because he's not getting those red zone targets. So a lot of things between the 20s, but seeing those 2 touchdowns, very encouraging from him. Expect that, though. Again, touchdowns are volatile. Expect that to go down. Nice week for him, though.
DJ Moore got some actual volume this week. He had 6 catches for 104 yards. It was really nice to see DJ Moore get some volume, especially for those of you who drafted him at price in PPR leagues. On that same note, the Bears are not really designing any run plays for Justin Fields, which is a big, bad sign for everybody who drafted Justin Fields, myself included. I have a couple Justin Fields shares. 4 carries for 3 yards today. He was saved by a rushing touchdown. But let's also note, Fields looks not very good at all, and that is just not good for his stock at all. It's just not good. That said, we are glad that DJ Moore was able to see some targets, and at least one of his weapons benefited from that.
Yeah, definitely discouraging for sure. The next guy we're going to talk about here is Tyler Lockett, who had a really solid week. This is what we love to see from Tyler Lockett. This is what we expected from him at the beginning of the season. As long as Tyler Lockett is healthy, as long as guys like Keenan Allen are healthy, those true number 1 wide receivers that are on the older side, as long as they're healthy, they're going to be those true number 1 wide receivers in fantasy and in the NFL. Lockett, 25 points, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 59 yards, and 2 touchdowns, out targeting DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba. As we expected, this is typical. This is what we thought would happen. And as long as Lockett's healthy, you got to be starting him every single week. A bounce back game for Seattle, 37 points total for that offense. Expect this to be regular. For sure.
They have a good offense. The Jaguars, their offense was mediocre today, but the receiving game was completely flipped from last week. Remember the Calvin Ridley victory laps after 1 week?
After week 1.
Yeah, and the Christian Kirk was dead sentiments. Christian Kirk had 11 catches on 14 targets. Ridley had only 2 catches on 8 targets, and Zay Jones actually had 0 catches on 6 targets. Look, expect better days for these 3, but all 3 are getting fairly good volume. Even though we like Ridley the best, their production will probably fluctuate because Lawrence doesn't key on one guy. And the defensive matchups are going to be key to trying to predict how many points those guys are going to score. Again, don't take victory laps after week 1 because Christian Kirk looked really good this week, and Calvin Ridley looked okay. Didn't get a lot of volume or not near as much as Christian Kirk. So
yeah, like we said in week 1, don't overreact. But in week 2, I'm going to overreact about one player, and that's the guy that got 20 targets. Puka Nacua for the Rams, 30 points this week. I mean, I would have been impressed if he'd done half of what he did in week 1, and he went up there and he upped it. 20 targets. I mean, at this point, I'm willing to overreact and say that he's going to be one of the top league winners in fantasy this year. Cooper Kupp is struggling to stay healthy. He has a hamstring. He's 30 years old. We don't know when he's actually going to be back. He's on IR. Is he going to be 100% when he's back? I mean, Puka Nacua has taken everything. Like, I'm not even concerned at this point at all. I think Puka's the guy there for the Rams. Matt Stafford, as long as he's playing, man, 55 pass attempts for 34 completions. Half of those went to Puka.
Jeez.
I mean, what do you have to say about this? Like, touchdowns are volatile. Touchdowns are not sustainable. Targets, volume, and opportunity are, and Puka's getting like dang near everything there.
It is great to see. It honestly is. Deebo Samuel also had a big day. Last week it was Brandon Aiyuk. This week it's Deebo Samuel. Expect more of that as well. Brandon Aiyuk will go on that as well. Failed to produce back-to-back weeks at a big level like he did. This is what we want to see from Brandon Aiyuk before we're 100% sold on him, is him performing consistently. That said, Deebo Samuel, he looked good today. He had a touchdown. He had over 20 points. So with Deebo Samuel coming back and having a big impact for your fantasy team, that is great to see. Also, Christian McCaffrey in that game had a very good game as well.
Yeah, he did. And moving over to the Giants and Cardinals game, a very surprisingly high-scoring game on both offenses, both ends of the ball. Daniel Jones ending with 30 fantasy points, threw the ball 37 times, 321 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, but his rushing upside there, like it always was, 59 yards and a touchdown. And this is why we had him as a guy that in our QB rankings this week, we had him as a top 5 start, and that really paid off because against that Arizona defense, they couldn't really stop him, especially in the second half when they finally came alive. Saquon Barkley, 27 points, 17 carries, 63 yards, and a touchdown with 6 receptions on top of that and a receiving touchdown. Great game, but we are definitely worried about the injury that he had at the very end as well. And we'll touch on that in the future part of this video.
Yeah, absolutely. James Conner produced like James Conner does produce. Hollywood Brown also looked good. So you're talking about these guys from the Cardinals offense that people were shorting just because it's a terrible offense and because they're not going to be able to do anything. And now you have fantasy weapons out of there scoring 15 or more points a game.
Josh Dobbs had 25 fantasy points. He threw the ball 31 times.
Yeah,
Who would have expected that?
If you missed out on those two guys, I mean, we were able to get them pretty cheap this year because of the situation.
Yep.
It's looking good if you drafted those two guys as well. And there's another very dominant receiver in the Cowboys game today.
Yeah, so Ceedee Lamb. I don't think this comes as a surprise for anyone, but if there was ever a question for anyone that Michael Gallup, maybe Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks, who was out this game, granted, whatever take away from Ceedee Lamb, I think Ceedee Lamb answered that question.
Yes.
He had 13 targets, 11 receptions, which is, really, really good, but like normal, really, really good, not Puka Nacua level, 143 yards. No touchdowns, but he still put up 25 points. That's what you expect from an elite level wide receiver.
That absolutely is what we're going to expect from CD. And then last, Brian Robinson went crazy today. He had a very, very good game for the Commanders in a game that I honestly thought the Broncos were going to win, but he had 29 points. He had 18 carries for 87 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He also had a 2-point conversion. He had 2 receptions also for 42 yards. So B-Rob, looking pretty good through a couple weeks, honestly. And B-Rob was a guy that I was taking because he was a starting running back going like past the 9th round this year. And so he was a guy that if you're drafting a lot of him, or if you have drafted a lot of him, then that's looking pretty good for you as well. All right, let's jump down to injuries real quick. AR, he's being evaluated for a concussion. I'm pretty sure he's got one. He slammed his head about as hard as he could against the turf. Gotta assume he's going to be a game time decision for week 3. That one is kind of TBD, and we don't know the severity of the concussion, but it's not looking fabulous for that week. That said, it's not something at least that's going to hinder him long term.
Yeah, no, I think he'll get over it fine. And the fact that, he played, it wasn't like a traumatic concussion because he played 3 possessions after that hit, which we would assume that was a hit. And unlike Andrew Luck, he actually pulled himself out, which is a promising sign. David Montgomery was carted off the field with an ankle. And when that happened, we feel really bad for David Montgomery. We really do. Like, as a player, always sucks that you get injured. But when that happened, we were like, oh, here we go. Jahmyr Gibbs, come on. And then Craig Reynolds gets like 3 carries at the end of the game.
That is literally
what the actual heck. With David Montgomery, I still do think we're going to say this again going into week 3. Assuming Montgomery is out next week, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a must start again. Yeah, Gibbs disappointed again this week, but Craig Reynolds can only do so much. Like, at some point, you have to assume that the Lions will actually properly utilize their 12th overall pick.
Yes.
Who's an actual talent.
Yeah. Davante Adams is being evaluated for a concussion. He took a really hard hit at the end of the game.
It was a dirty one too.
We'll wait to see, but he had a very good week as well. I didn't mention that. Davante Adams looking like Jimmy Garoppolo can support him as a wide receiver one. Interesting. But he's got to be in the concussion protocol for now.
Yeah, so Joe Burrow aggravated his calf at the end of the game. He said he would have gone back in there if it was another possession, but unknown on how it will feel in the coming days and in the coming weeks. Honestly, I think knowing in the past, I mean, Cincinnati started the season 1-3 last year and their offense didn't look very good. I think you can expect a similar start this season and probably some down weeks for T. Higgins, even though he had a good one this week. He may have a down week next week. Same with Ja'Marr Chase. Same with Boyd. Same with everyone except for Joe Mixon. I think as long as the Cincinnati Bengals offense is struggling, you can expect Mixon to get plenty of volume. And he's my go-to guy this first quarter of the season, honestly, in that offense, as long as Joe Burrow is still banged up, still getting back from that calf injury. And if they have to pull him out for a game, you're definitely looking at Mixon as a must start.
Absolutely. And then in the last game of the day, we saw Saquon Barkley leave the game getting his leg twisted. We don't know a lot about that, but it didn't look particularly good. I'm kind of worried about that. Garrett Wilson also left the game. We don't really have any information on that at the moment, but those are two huge, ginormous, like top 2 round picks in fantasy injuries to monitor. All right, let's get to our waiver section, the section you clearly all have been waiting for. I'll let you start with our first one here. One guy that we actually called this week is
Simon called it. We got to give him his flowers, give him his credit here with Josh Reynolds. I mean, I was honestly like, really?
That was
okay.
I got to take credit for that too. That was me and Simon.
Okay, all right, both of you. And I ended up starting him. I did, and it paid off, obviously. He had a great week, had a touchdown, featured on our Must Flex video. So until Jameson Williams comes back, the dude's got to be a big factor in the high-scoring Lions offense, and we can address Jameson Williams in that situation once we get there, but that's 4 weeks away. We still have a lot of football left before that happens. So until then, Josh Reynolds, I think you got to flex him in those deeper formats.
Yeah, the next guy is going to be Zack Moss, and if you watched our start sit stream last week on Friday night, we told you, hey, go pick up Zack Moss now because he's going to be one of the top waiver ads come Monday morning. You are going to want to have him on your team, and you're going to have some trade leverage. And Zack Moss is the second most trending player on Sleeper right now. Look, he's another guy that was mentioned last week, like I said, and if he's available, you should snag him. He's available in like 52% of Sleeper leagues, so that means he is available out there some places. And look, truthfully, we don't love starting Colts running backs, but he is, again, going to be very valuable to some of your league mates. So he's definitely a guy we are chasing on the waivers this year or this week, and probably our second priority for this week.
Yeah, I agree. Roschon Johnson rostered in 52% of Sleeper leagues right now. Foreman was a healthy scratch, so that was a really good sign for Roschon and his volume. He only had 6 points today. Now this is the time that we want to go and get him for depth. This is something that we said in last week's playbook. We said, hey, let's wait a little bit for Roschon Johnson until you start him. A lot of the points that he got in week 1 were really fluky and garbage time. I mean, 5 of his receptions came in the last 2 minutes when they were playing for nothing. And there you go, right on cue. Roschon had a down week this week, as we expected, but he is going to get more volume. He is the most efficient running back there, even more than Khalil Herbert, more talented, everything. So we're excited about him in the coming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, with Roschon Johnson, like the reason everybody's going to be running to get him from waivers this week is because everybody saw that Deonta Foreman was a healthy scratch. Okay, so we were telling you to wait. Now you can't wait because everybody else is going to be getting him. He is a guy at the end of the season you will want to have on your fantasy roster for sure. Jayden Reed's going to be our next guy. You obviously saw him go off for 2 touchdowns today. He did have 8 targets. He was one of our rookie favorites. Like, this was one of my guys. So honestly, we're feeling pretty proud of Jayden Reed, but we know, again, that Christian Watson and Aaron Jones did not play. We are acknowledging that. That said, this is a guy that I think could come in and do this week to week. I mean, this is a guy that is playing a lot out of the slot. He's going to get a lot of plays drawn up for him. He is clearly translating his skills to the NFL at a fairly high level. So we like Jayden Reed, and we do think he's probably worth a waiver pickup this week, and he will be a popular waiver pickup in your leagues this week. And then our last guy.
Yeah, so our last guy is going to be Nico Collins, rostered in 56% of his leagues, and the targets are incredibly encouraging. I mean, this is what we questioned with Houston's offense. We said, who is the number 1 receiver going to be there? And it's looking like Nico Collins, potentially, him or Tank Dell. And I think right now it's 50-50. We can call our shot. We can say, hey, it'll be one or the other. Honestly, if I were to tell you who it would be, I would probably go with the veteran for the time being.
Yes.
As the season progresses and as these guys get better, maybe Tank Dell could usurp Nico Collins. For now, I trust Nico Collins a little bit more. That's going to be the shot I call, and he's going to be the guy that's less rostered than someone like Tank Dell, who had a lot of preseason hype.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move to the buys section of this video. And for our buys, this is going to be very Bengals heavy this week, starting with Jahmyr Chase. We all know the talent that Jahmyr Chase is. And after 2 games, he is not looking like Jahmyr Chase. I think there are going to be people that overreact to that. Some managers, if you ask about him, might laugh you off the face of the earth. The smart ones probably will. But if you can go to your manager that has Jahmyr Chase and say, hey, look, is this guy available for trade? What can I get him for? And you are able to get him at even a 25% discount of what he was going for in the first round of fantasy startup drafts, like that is something I'm definitely taking advantage of. Joe Burrow, I think Joe Burrow will continue to get healthy, but I don't really think it matters. I think Jahmyr Chase is one of those QB-proof guys. I think even if they do end up having to bring somebody else in to start for Joe Burrow, Jahmyr Chase is going to be Jahmyr Chase.
I mean, he still had 8 targets today. So,
and historically, the Bengals offense has started slow. So you're seeing that again this year. They're going to pick it up at the end of the season. It is the Bengals. They are a good team. They are a complete roster. Jahmyr Chase is an amazing receiver. He's absolutely somebody that you're going to want to have on your team at the end of the season. So if you can get him at a discount now, we're absolutely taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and the same thing's going to apply here to Joe Mixon. Same team. He only scored 10.3 points in week 1 and 13.5 points in week 2. So teams might be disappointed by him, and they might be wanting to sell him. He's averaging 13 carries and 5 targets a game. The 5 targets is what I'm really excited about. And the Bengals offense, we've already said this. I'll say it a third time. They start slow. They're probably, by the end of the season, going to be contending for a Super Bowl, per usual, because Joe Burrow is one of the top 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. As they get better, Mixon will come along with them. And honestly, even before then, before they get better, the guy that I think has the highest floor is the most trustworthy guy in that offense is going to be Joe Mixon. Like I said before, he has the guaranteed volume as the running back.
The next guy is going to be A.J. Brown. We all saw how frustrated A.J. Brown was on Thursday night. And look, these are some big names that are buys. But when you have guys, big names that start this slow, you will have very reactive fantasy managers, especially if you're playing in home leagues, casual leagues, guys who don't know what these players truly are. A.J. Brown truly is one of the best receivers in the NFL, playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And when you have those two things happening at once, it's impossible. It's seemingly impossible that this trend for A.J. Brown is going to continue. 16 targets through 2 weeks, that's obviously got to go up. Only 108 yards and no touchdowns. So again, I think some of your more casual fantasy managers will look at that and say, yeah, he's not having a good year, so maybe I should get him off my roster. And guys, you need to buy because A.J. Brown's pissed. And when A.J. Brown's pissed, A.J. Brown's probably about to go off in the next couple of games.
Yeah,
I would almost
probably
set my watch to it. So if you can get him at even a slight discount before that, A.J. Brown, elite fantasy talent, another top 2-round guy that we're talking about buying right now, you should absolutely be looking into A.J. Brown and asking your manager that has A.J. Brown if they're willing to move him and what they would move him for.
Yeah. And going down to our sells, we're only going to have one sell today. Again, we're going to be really conservative with our sells, but it will be Mike Evans. Even though Mike Evans had such a great week, he split opportunity with Chris Godwin. Same amount of targets as Chris Godwin did. He was just able to take these to the house. And as we said above, we absolutely believe in Mike Williams, the player. We believe in him as a talent. We don't think that he's going to really fall off like a lot of people expected him to, but I think we are expecting his fantasy production to go down. Right now, he's a wide receiver 1 in scoring. That is not going to remain. If you can get him plus a solid running back for one of the buys that we had in this video, like A.J. Brown, maybe if you're lucky, even like Jahmyr Chase, which I don't think is very possible, but hey, if you're lucky, maybe it'll happen in one of your casual leagues. Evans has faced the Vikings and the Bears so far. Same situation as Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans is a better talent, obviously, but look at these defenses. I mean, they've been lit up for the past 2 weeks. 2 of the easiest secondaries you're going to see all year. The Bucs schedule is going to get nothing but more difficult as the season progresses. So definitely looking to sell Mike Evans right now, unfortunately.
Extremely well said. And honestly, like we're really sad about having to say that about Mike Evans. There is no way he continues this production. It's just not happening at this age with that quarterback within that system. Not happening for Mike Evans. So I would be looking to sell him and capitalize on that. All right, that's the end of it. Lots to come this week, tons of content. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because we are going to have the best content to prepare you for week 3. Oh no, the fantasy season is going too fast already.
I know.
It should not be prepping for week 3.
I know.
But we're going to get you ready for week 3, and we're going to get you ready to win your fantasy matchups both next week and for the rest of the season. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you drop a like on this video to help us and help us dominate the YouTube algorithm. We're still growing, and we hope you would. Wow. We hope that you will help us out by liking and subscribing. Flockfantasy.com if you want to join our community. That's where all of our exclusive rankings, our full rankings, our articles, our Discord, everything is over on flockfantasy.com/domain. You use code domain, you get 30% off, and it puts you in our community. So join us over there if you want to be a part of the domain community. We're always there to answer your questions. We're very active. We love helping people out, and that's the best way for us to do that. Guys, thanks for watching. Football week 2 is over. Enjoy week 3. We will see you later.